Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me here and for putting on this great event, which I'm really enjoying. I'm hearing some new ideas that I don't hear about at conferences in the States, and that's refreshing. And I'm really glad that there's a female section sort of today, because I think it empowers all of us to reach a little farther in our perspective when we're doing this together in this way, although I do hope that more women keep showing up in all the other panels as well, of course. And I think that will happen as everyone becomes more aware, which is our project, isn't it? So, let's see. I speak extemporaneously. I gather my notes from my heart and my mind and the crowd and the event that I'm at. I challenge myself to do that. I don't have slides this time because I'm just trying to be in the moment. And I'd say I've learned two great lessons that can be put into aphorisms from psychedelics. Of course, many other things, but not everything goes into just a few words, since words are, as we've just repeated several times, inadequate symbols for our experience. But nevertheless, I'm sure many of you feel that be here now is one of the greatest rules to live by, and psychedelics really help us understand what that means and do that. And I'll just say, even though it's not what my talk is about, that don't know when I'll be back to London to say it again. So nothing is what it appears to be. Nothing at all is what it appears to be. And I have learned that in my many years, not only of taking psychedelics, but of working with Native peoples who seem to understand that much better than our materially oriented cultures do. That everything is an illusion and everything may change from what it appears to be now to something else at any moment is kind of a rule to live by, which means that's the principle of uncertainty. So, and thank you to Anna for that really fun talk. The title of my talk is actually The Perception of Feminine Personas in Psychedelic Species. But it has a subtext, which I would call the embodiment of feminine qualities in the psychedelic self. And so I want to talk about those qualities as much as those beings or perceived beings. And I'm going to swirl around a little bit because what just popped into my mind is a couple of days ago here in Greenwich, as I was walking along, I saw a woman, very properly dressed, official-looking woman walking along with a purse on which were printed the words, "Accept the mystery." And I just thought, well, that's really great and really feminine in terms of a way of understanding that is the balance to the quantitative, taxonomic. What is it? How can we talk about it? Can we put it into words? Can we understand what it is? Can we nail it down and move on to the next thing? Approach, which is a more masculine approach, but it's really important to, I feel, to always remember that we each have within us the masculine and the feminine swirling, dancing, sometimes doing battle. But it's always within all of us. This isn't really about men and women. This is about the masculine and the feminine principles and how they manifest in our inner lives and in our outer lives. And and I could easily go on about that for this short half hour, but because we are also talking about the psychedelics themselves, I want to circle round to the species or to the substances and address these qualities in them as well as in us. So please bear with me while we swim through this topic. I'm what I call a functional animist. One of my great awakenings in life was about 25 years ago when I was on my second great fieldwork period in the Amazon. The first had been in the 1970s and the second in the early 1990s. And that's, I have to say, when I stopped wondering and just actually really knew what it meant, that everything is alive and everything is talking to everyone. And every species is a being, every species. So we're one being, human, and each of those species out there, which we have carefully classified and given names, and every culture does that to the nature around them, is also a being. Each species is a being, so hold that concept without more explanation of it, and imagine the conversation between all of these species. And so any particular specimen of the species is the voice of that species, is the perspective of that species. And these are in conversation together. When I really understood that, it was ground shaking for me. And I thought, how could I have been psychedelic for decades and an ethnobotanist for decades and in the Amazon and Mexico and the Pacific and elsewhere in the world as well, all this time studying worldview and plants and people and not have really, really understood it in my blood. And that's when I got it, and I have to say I'm very grateful for that moment and for how it has guided me to be aware in that way ever since. So functionally, and I've thought then about, well, what does it mean to be an animist, or whatever word you want to use for that awareness in our modern times. And I think that what it does is give us a deeper, more active, engaged relationship with everything. And when we want to, when we're aware in that way of the aliveness of whatever is around us, then, and this is a feminine response, but then we want to take care of it. So we become better stewards of the world. All of our ancestors, whatever background we're from, have had this for all of human history. Everything is alive, everything is engaged in relationship with everything else. I'm a small part of that relationship. We together are a small part of that. We all have a duty to watch out for each other. And so I think that kind of stewardship, which is so needed in the world now, the awareness that we're, that things have tipped out of balance. And given that health is balance, our job, as we become aware, is to tip it back as much as we can, each of us in our individual life and together in our collective life, toward balance. And it's very much the job of the psychedelic people, I think, to be seeking balance. We are outside the dominant culture, but we know that what we do and what we say and what we experience and what we put out there in those psychedelic moments, whether they're ceremonial or our individual seeking, we know that that's medicine for the planet, and that that's dropping a little bit more light, a little bit more heart, a little bit more connection with the ancient and with the unconscious and with the prayer for the future. All of that goes into it if we have that awareness and in a way a sense of collective responsibility too. So of course we're not just seeking to heal our own individual wounds. We're seeking to heal and rebalance the big picture. And this kind of awareness of the flow of life and energy through time, whatever the heck that is, and space. A little bit easier to imagine what that is, but the flow of this, the flow of being, the qualities, and I want to go back then to the feminine qualities that, or the things that we associate as feminine. Potential. Potential is the feminine. Manifestation is the masculine. These are classic archetypal ways of identifying the masculine, feminine dance, and receptive. the being able to receive without quantifying, without judging even, just to hold awareness. That's a feminine quality. How many of us in our psychedelic seeking, well, even the word seeking, and I consider myself a seeker as well, but it's like we think we know what we're looking for, so we're hunting, you know. An old Amazonian woman told me once, she said, people from your place come here and they always think they know what they want, so they miss what's all around them, that's whispering to them. And this is one of the big lessons I got too, is like, it's the listening, it's the being receptive to the whispering of the universe to you that is where the real wisdom is. And you have to like cleanse yourself, let yourself go, relax yourself, and ground yourself. Grounding, one of the great arts that we have lost and need to relearn, in order to be able to appreciate and even witness this unbidden information that comes to us from the world. So that receptivity, that sense of being a vessel, and you know, every ceremony you're in is a vessel is created. The circle is a vessel. The maloka is a vessel. The little haven you make for yourself in your own private tripping spot is a vessel, and that vessel is receptive. And what we do, the principle of creating this feminine container in which to hold ourselves while we go through transformative experiences is that we create a vessel that surrounds us, and so we are safe and we are contained and we're able to receive, and the top of the vessel is open, and that's where the transmission occurs. That's where we send up our light and our questions and what's generated there, and that's where we receive the same the blessings that come down, and that creating of a vessel, which we do intentionally usually when we're getting ready to do. I mean, I have to say, digression, I just went to the first of the last 5 Dead concerts. You probably all heard about them. Yes, and I went to the first and second ones, and so there are, you know, close to 80,000 people at each one of these. And I thought about that concept of the vessel container holding people in an altered state in ceremony. And of course, I used to go to dead shows a lot when I was younger, so I already got the principle, and that, you know, many times 20,000 people on LSD all together vibrating exactly the same way is just marvelous transformative experience. But it is a vessel. That stadium can be a vessel for transformation. That really was so moving this time to feel that 20 years later, everybody could get together with that very meme and embody it. Really marvelous. And so I want to thank the people, and that is you might have noticed, a male-dominated model, as much of music still, but it is dominated, or it is just almost, I really hesitate to use the word channeled, because it, during the New Age, got such a, you know, squirrely reputation, but I don't really have always a good word to replace it, but that allowing yourself to receive energy and then and work with it a little bit and put it out again, that good healers do, that good musicians do, that hopefully good speakers do, you know, and then carrying people along with them. It is not, even if it's all men doing it, the quality of what they're bringing and the intention of what is being shared can be feminine, and the experience then can be of receiving and transforming as well. So I try to not get caught in direct gender identification with each of us little tiny specks of beings that we are. You know, we are it all together. We are the masculine and the feminine. It, just as the yin and yang represents everything. We can't do it without. I mean, who wants to live in an entirely yang world. Who wants to live in an entirely yin world? First of all, it's not possible. And secondly, it wouldn't be in balance, So it's like, how do we balance those things? And what, and what do, and how do we value the yin qualities that tend to be pushed to the background? And among those, I would include intuition. I would include intellect, but heart-centered intellect. And many indigenous people talk about there being two brains. One brain in the head that, names things and remembers things and solves problems and all of that, and a actually more central brain in the heart, which it senses things, which is actually aware. And I think we've lost the recognition that that's how we work. And by doing that, we shut it off right here, So we need to be able to remember that our awareness, I think it's a good practice, that our awareness is, if it's centered here and the brain is in the service of this kind of awareness, then we get a fuller toolbox with which to work in this world. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
So quiet. And part of the feminine quality that I think is really beautiful and important to remember is that, from my point of view anyway, is that we have a sense of, there's a kind of courage and risk-taking. There's kind of diving into the area of risk that is between what's known and what's unknown, and that's between the dark and the light. And I think it comes in this, now I will refer to women particularly, because I think it comes very much from us in our relationship to birth and birthing, but also as caregivers, as those who help others through these places that have to do with the risk of life and death, or the reality of giving birth and of dying, and taking care of other beings in these transitions, as well as going through them. We have a kind of a built-in courage to be able to do that. I would say that I am a person who's comfortable with risk, and that's kind of what's gotten me to this point in life. And yet I'm also a mother and a grandmother, and I know what it means to nurture and protect. And one reason I like to teach shamanic techniques of creating ceremony or transformative moments where people can undergo risk, undergo change, and come out standing on their feet at least as good as they went in the day before, is because of the impulse to take care of the world. That impulse is a feminine impulse as well. Gosh, there's so much to share, and so I'm just going to jump around here and say these qualities, and I want to talk just a minute about some of the plants. So I just want to list some of the qualities that that come up, I think, in these experiences, and that are just reflections of our lives, and other edgy, other experiences that push us to the edge, that push us to our fullest capacity or beyond what we think our fullest capacity is, can bring these all up as well as daily life. But these deities or beings or spirits, teachers, we have many different names for them, that appear in these plant experiences and in the mushroom experiences, and sometimes even with LSD. They include, of course, compassion, which we think of as a feminine quality. And we all have compassion, don't we? But we have it to different degrees, or we turn it on and off, or we are afraid to let it show. There are many different ways to deal with that. But that compassion is one of the things that is awakened, I find, in the experience with these, with the psychedelics. I hope you don't mind if I keep using that old-fashioned word, but I love it still. I get to be old-fashioned. There's a number of advantages to getting old, and some of them are permission that you give yourself. But another is sorrow. It's accepting that sorrow and sorrowing for the world is okay. There is a lot of suffering in the world. There is a lot of suffering all around us. There will be much more suffering before this big drama is over that we're in. And I find that part of every big experience is just letting myself feel that. It's the weeping. It's weeping for the world, you know. It's part of our job to be aware that way and to let ourselves do it, let ourselves feel it. And you know that even in the old days, in the LSD days before we had the mushrooms and ayahuasca and all of these things, I always knew that at some point in the trip would be the waterfall of tears. The waterfall of tears would just wash me clean. It would wash and rinse everything that I was sorrowing for. It would be a little bit of the invisible help that I could give to the world. It would be acknowledging the pain and sending compassion and letting that go. And I just encourage you, male or female, to allow that quality to come forth and to realize it's one of the jobs of conscious people. It's not all joy, and it's not all reason by any means, you know. And that's okay. That is actually how it is. And a part related to that is, I think, it's a female archetype, and that's mending. And I use that word for it at least, because late in each trip, depends on what it is, but late in each trip, I realize it comes into my awareness that I'm beginning to think about people I know, or causes that I identify with, or projects that I have witnessed, and I realize, oh, there's something I could do for that person, or now I understand why that person is that way and has that habit. And what could I say that's never been said? Just a simple little thing, you know? And that's when I pick up my mending basket and I start darning those holes and darning those socks and just sending a little prayer of mending out in all those directions. And don't you sort of catalog the people that are closest to you sometime in a trip, you know? And also very much where the medicine came from. And you think about, where did that medicine come from? And I really, really pray that that person isn't doing time for getting me medicine, you know? And sometimes they are. And so that's part of the real looking at the world and the real mending you can do. And we can do it in that virtual way. We can do it as activists, and we should. But we can also do it in these experiences because we're very powerful in those experiences. And what love we send out in those moments is really potent. It really is helping. I fully believe that. So let's keep doing that. And I think I just have a minute. You have 3. I have 3 minutes, okay. So I'm sorry I have said all this and not like sort of told stories or listed shamanic plants or any of those things, but I think rather than do that, maybe that'll come up as questions somewhat, because different species have different personas associated with them in our projection. I know a lot of people refer to ayahuasca as Mama Ayahuasca or something like that, but ayahuasca is, in many people in the Amazon, not considered female, and I think it's considered, the vine is considered androgynous, the leaf of Psychoactive viridis is usually considered female. The overall ayahuasca is considered to be a blend of these things. I think that our culture's need for a big grandmother to hold us and to nourish us is why we say ayahuasca is a female, why we have adopted that. I'm not quite done yet. And I just like to again on the kind of, I don't know, woman warrior side of femininity, I'd like to say that back in the what I call the good old LSD days, they were simpler in a way. But I was a tarot reader among many other things at that time, and I, of course, thought about each of the suits in the tarot, the cups and the hearts and the wands and the swords and all of that, or the wands and the hearts are the same, etc. And but what I identified with was the Queen of Swords, cutting through, and that's the clarity of mind, which I think is also feminine. I think that there's a way in which a real clarity of mind and seeing what is and not what's presented or what wants